Welcome to the Working Genius podcast, where we discuss anything and everything related to the 6 types of working genius and how it impacts your work and your life. I'm Pat Lencioni, your host today, and I'm joined by 3 co-hosts. I'm very excited. Cody Thompson, how you doing?
I was trying to think of the Backstreet Backstreet's Back song that I could sing, because I love, been away from you guys for a while. It's good to be back on the podcast. But
because he loves boy bands. That's why what he was going to say.
Exactly. Yeah. And also, they don't need to hear us sing, so I'll forego that part of the podcast.
And on behalf of our audience, I want to thank you, Cody. I want to thank you. Tracy
you.
Noble, how you doing, Trace?
Hello, I'm great today.
It's great to be here. Beau Johnson, how you doing, Beau?
I'm excited to be here. We've had a long last month launching this book, and it's been really, really fun together.
That's right. And this is going to be a really fun topic to talk about. It just came up yesterday in our office. Cody, what's the title of today's episode?
What each genius craves.
That's right. What does each genius crave? Crave from others. Mm-hmm. And every genius has a different craving. And that's what we're going to talk about. It's like the thing they need the most. They want the most. And what do they want to hear, and what do they need from others? And this came about again because I was in the office, and as a discerner, I won't jump there, but I thought, as a discerner, I just really want people to say this, or this is what I want them to do. And so we said, I bet every different genius type has a different craving, and they do. Mm-hmm. So this is brand new. We're sharing it with you. This is a work in progress, as you know. And so we're going to share that today. So where should we start?
Well, before we even get into there, I think one of the reasons this was so compelling to me when you brought this idea up is, as people have read the book and as they've experienced the model and taken the assessment, we just keep hearing things about how the language is helping to change teams. And I saw this review on Amazon. It's so fun to hear people's stories that they're sharing, commenting, sharing on Instagram and on LinkedIn and on Amazon reviews. This person, Megan, said, this book changes how you think about all your interactions. And that's some of what we're talking about today, is your interactions with people and what they're craving. Here's another one from Stacy. She said, I personally feel so much more valued now that my team knows the gifts I bring to work, because I'm being asked to put those gifts into play, and it's helping the team win.
Yeah, I love that one. I love what Stacy, I think, said there, and that is that this is what we need from others to feel valued. Mm-hmm. And different geniuses need different things. And of course, we're combinations. Most of us have, we all have 2 geniuses, but we're going to go through it genius by genius and say, a person with that letter, with that genius, what is it that they crave more than anything else? And this is going to be our best attempt at that, but we're going to talk about it now. It's not perfect. It's not done. So, Tracy, you had a novel idea that we should start, I don't know, at the beginning?
Yes, I tend to do that. Yeah, let's start with the genius of wonder.
There's a song from The Sound of Music that does that, right? Mm-hmm. Start at the very beginning. It's a very fine place to start. I'm not going to sing it. My wife loves The Sound of Music.
I thought we weren't singing.
I know.
If you guys want me to do the Backstreet thing, I can do it. But if he gets to sing Sound of Music, I get to do Backstreet. So let me know.
I want you to do a boy band.
Make a right, guys.
That's right. 2 wrongs won't make a right. Okay, let's talk about the genius of wonder, the W. What is it that a person who wonders wants the most? And the word we came up with is, what is it, Tracy?
It's consideration.
Yeah, and that's a word like being considerate, but they want people to consider what they're wondering about. So a wonderer often asks the question like, hey, I wonder what about this? Or why is this the way it is? And what they really want is somebody to say that the best thing they can hear is, hey, that's a great question.
Yeah.
Because that means the person is going, whoa, I'm going to think about that too. That question is worthy of my consideration. And so that is the thing they crave. Now, on the other side, what would be the worst thing they could hear? What did we decide yesterday, Tracy?
Who cares?
Yeah. I wonder what... Yeah, who cares? That's just like, I'm going to chop your legs off. So when people wonder, they would like to know that other people think what they're wondering is worth considering.
It's so interesting too, Pat, because so many of the people who've taken the assessment who have wonder as a gift, the stories are all very similar in the sense that the rest of the world is so action oriented that they did get for many years in their careers, like the who cares, or we don't have time to stop and think about that. Like they didn't get the, oh, that's a really good question vibe or that response. And so many of them, I love that word consideration, because it's not just consideration. It's that considering their question is valuable to the process of work. That if you start with the right question or the right problem they've identified, that is just as integral to all the other phases of work. And because it can happen in an instant or it happens in a question, it's been so easily overlooked. The way when you describe this, you say people with wonder didn't even realize that that this was in fact a genius, until we start to just like break apart that every piece of meaningful work starts with the right question or identifying the right problem. So I love that totally someone with wonder saying like that the rest of the team would consider that worthy of the starting place.
Yeah. And I think that of all the 6 types, wonder is the one we're getting so many people to write to us and say, I never knew it was a genius. I think we're going to have to write a whole book about just people with the genius of wonder and how they're feeling, justified and recognized as a result of this. More than any other type, it's a wonderful thing. And you're right. What they want is somebody to say, what you do matters, and we consider it valuable. So consideration. Sound good?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Sounds good.
Alrighty. Where should we go next, Tracy?
I don't know. Maybe the genius of invention.
The genius of invention. So I have this one, and I think what I need more than anything else is freedom. Freedom, like no constraints. I want somebody to come to me and say, just come up with something original and don't worry about it. Anything you come up with is good. In other words, they're not putting constraints or boundaries around me, and they're allowing me to have the freedom to invent without any parameters.
Yeah, it's interesting when you said the opposite for wonder would be who cares. I thought, I wonder what, because I'm genius. One of my geniuses is invention also, and I wrote the word constraint. That's the opposite. That's the when it's like, hey, go make something, but do it, in this tiny little box or this tiny little easel that you get to paint on.
Right. Yeah. Just make it a little better.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we don't need it to change it very much.
It's interesting. I just probably 30 minutes before this podcast, I was talking to a friend of mine who wasn't familiar with Working Genius, but he's a filmmaker, and I've known him for years, and I started telling him about Working Genius, and I was like, I know he has the genius of invention. And he just finished his assessment like 5 minutes before we got on. He's a WI. And when I was asking him what he's up to and what he's doing, he's like, oh, we're making this feature film. And he loved if someone had told him to make a film, but put it in a box, like it needs to be this genre, or it needs to be this theme, or it needs to do, and just the freedom to create the film was the part that gave him the most joy.
But it's interesting that you titled this podcast, What Each Genius Craves, because I know as an inventor, that isn't what's always needed.
Craving, I crave ice cream every night. Doesn't mean I should eat it.
Right.
By the way, I've been having pumpkin ice cream lately because, it's almost Halloween. It's quite delicious. So I highly recommend that.
Wow.
Anyway, but this segue brought to you by pumpkin ice cream. Find it in your grocer's freezer. Okay,
yeah, so
but you're right. We crave it. It doesn't mean we should always have it.
But it helps you all working with me to know what's going to feel like to me, which is that constraint, and to be able to affirm, like, I know right now you wish that we had a blank slate and we could just throw all the cards up in the air, but we just can't right now. We just need to talk about making a 5% improvement.
Right. And we were talking about W before. Matt, our engineer, is the W on this call. And if he wonders something and it's not the right time, rather than just go, hey, stop doing that, go, hey, we appreciate that. we could consider that, but this is not the right time to do it. But we appreciate the fact that that's what you do. And so another time that would be okay, rather than just letting them, wilt on the tree like whatever wilts on trees.
Pumpkins.
All right.
Pumpkin ice cream.
Pumpkin ice cream. It's like pumpkin ice cream dripping off of a pumpkin ice cream tree. All right.
Is it just pumpkin, or is there like chocolate chips or
No,
caramel?
it's just pumpkin. It's fantastic. I wish I knew what brand it was, because obviously they're going to be different. But it's my son, my 16-year-old, thought it was disgusting. And I was like, this is great. More for me. Okay. Moving right along to discernment. What is it that a person that has discernment craves? And now, Cody, you have discernment. So do you, Tracy. Does this make sense to you? The answer to this?
Absolutely. Yes.
Because what I thought is they crave trust. They want you to trust in their judgment, in their instinct, in their assessment of things. Right? What's a great thing to hear, Cody, when you want that?
It's so interesting because you said this, like, this is why this came up in the office, is you were like, I'm seeing something in this and I don't need to have to argue for it. I just need people to trust that my gut instincts, my intuition around this is right. And that is absolutely true. Like, when, as a discerner, when somebody says like, hey, they come to you first of all with this request of like, hey, can you help me figure this out? And then they trust your answer. It is really, really a meaningful place to be. Now, I will say this slight nuance, which is Tracy, who's a DE, a discerner enabler, and Pat, whose other genius is invention. I have a little bit more tolerance to argue for people to trust me, because I have galvanizing. I'm like, if you don't trust it, just let me galvanize you into trusting it. But it sure does, in the purest form, when somebody says, boy, thank you, like, I totally trust your answer. That is a really meaningful response to a discerner.
Right.
On the flip side of that, if someone says to me, prove it, that is I can't prove it. I'm sorry, just trust me.
Right.
That's hard for me to hear.
Now, let's just say somebody doesn't quite understand what you're saying. A great thing to say to a person with discernment is, hey, your gut is usually pretty good. I'm not getting this. So explain to me more about that, because I'm not sure I agree, but your gut is usually pretty close. So in other words, just affirming that you have that. I think people that have discernment and they're in a family or on a team where people don't know that that's a genius, I think it's a real burden, because they feel like, and if you don't have galvanizing, which isn't one of mine, having to argue for people to believe what your gut is screaming at you about is really painful.
Well, and Tracy, I love that the opposite of trust is prove it. And in some ways, like the most like cynical way to do that is go ahead and try it. And then when it fails, that will be me proving it. I can't tell you in advance that that's not going to work, but you go ahead and try, and then we'll have another conversation later, and that'll be the prove it conversation. But but you're told, the prove it. In fact, I was just in a meeting with Beau earlier today where I was like, I hope you don't tell me to prove it, but I don't feel great about this thing. I'd love to change it. I can't really tell you why, other than like sort of this nebulous three ideas I have. And when somebody just goes, okay, great, that feels amazing.
And Beau is a great partner for a discerner, because when we were brainstorming with Beau, he does kind of come into it going, there's probably some merit to what you're saying. I don't necessarily see it as quickly as you, but I trust that you're actually good at that. So let me ask you some more questions, as opposed to going, no, that's probably not it. No, that's probably not it. As a discerner, I want to thank you, Beau, for that.
I've seen how leading with I trust you helps put each of you at ease. And especially you, Cody and Pat, because I work a little more often with you, is to be able to start the conversation with, hey, I'm bringing this to you because I trust your discernment. I watch your, stress is the wrong word, but like, oh, good, I'm not going to have to try to argue or prove anything. We're starting with a posture of trust. And I was thinking about this word crave. Like, why don't we give people what they crave? And I think sometimes there's a little bit of a shadow side of, oh, gosh, if I give them what they crave, they might take too much of it. But actually, if I just give you what you crave, typically healthy people will take the right amount of it. So me telling Cody, hey, I trust you and trust your discernment in this, he doesn't ever overstep there. In fact, he's then willing to ask more questions and be open to corporate discernment when I lead with that trust.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Karen just wrote something down, and I was thinking exactly the same thing, Karen. And that is, we fear that they're going to be needy, or we fear that we're encouraging their neediness.
Wow.
And by the way, I was talking to a psychologist recently. He said, there's a big difference between being needy and being hungry. And crave is about hunger, not neediness. It's like, if you give me just a little bit of trust, that'll make me relax enough to where I can entertain this. But if you deprive me of any semblance of trust, then as a discerner, I'm going to be really, really hungry, and it's going to be hard for me to operate.
Yep. It's so interesting too, as we've gone now through 3 of these. Part of this is just creating the environment where this can actually happen, like creating for the wonder to say, hey, we're going to slow down a little bit and let you ask some, questions and pay attention. Are there any yellow flags? And that is the thing that stimulates that craving, that desire to use their genius for the sake of the team or the endeavor. And, the inventor to say, hey, we kind of have a blank slate, like Pat, we were talking about, we need to get Pat in to help us get our next thematic goal going. We need his invention for that, and just sort of creating that environment. And, Beau, something you've done even twice this week is you've said to me, you've introduced me to a friend of yours or a problem, and you go, hey, can you just come over and do that thing you do where you sort of sort through all the things that we're talking about and pinpoint the ones we need to talk about? I'm like, oh, I love that. So just creating the space for those cravings to be met. And like you said, when you do that, you don't overeat. You don't you take a healthy portion of that and go, oh, they invited me in here. They're creating space for that. I'm going to do just the thing they're asking me to do.
Yeah. Well, when you think about craving from a psychological or in a personal standpoint, what everybody craves is to be seen and understood and wanted. And it's like, oh, you see that I'm good at this. You understand that I need this, and that's true. And you want me to be who I am. And when people don't feel seen, understood, or wanted, they're gonna drip off a tree like pumpkin ice cream. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. All right, let's move on to galvanizing. The G. We really debated this one. Yeah. And it's like, and Cody and Beau, I don't want to say Bodie and Co, because sometimes we do that. But Cody and Beau, when they galvanize people, what they want is what's the word, Tracy, we said?
Confirmation.
Yeah, and that's a wonky word, but we couldn't think of a better one. But it's like they want someone to confirm that the thing that they're galvanizing around is being received and responded to. We almost put excitement or reaction. But what a galvanizer doesn't want is somebody to be kind of indifferent to what they're saying. They want somebody to go, oh, yeah, we need to do that.
Yep.
So they need a little bit of enthusiasm. But we called it confirmation, somebody to confirm that thing you're galvanizing around is real and worthwhile. Does that make sense, you guys? I'm not sure this is the right word. I'm still struggling with a better word for this.
I was thinking about what is the opposite. So, Cody, I'm curious which words of these resonate with you more. At first, I thought, is it resistance? But actually, I think it's apathy that is the worst.
Yes. Yeah. It's interesting. I thought of the opposite word being stagnant. If people don't move, that there's something around the movement. So confirmation is in the ballpark because it's oh, I agree that this is worth some energy and movement and momentum. And I know as a galvanizer, and I'm guilty of this a lot, is if I'm on a Zoom screen and I'm galvanizing a bunch of people on a Zoom screen and I don't see heads nodding or people receiving that galvanizing, then I just keep going. So I'll just keep, oh, maybe they're not understanding it. Maybe I got to try a little harder. And as soon as you see this receiving of that and then some energy and momentum, one of the best things that can happen on that Zoom call is somebody go, oh yeah, I'm going to do that right after we hang up. I'm like, oh, okay, my work here is done. And then so there is this confirmation movement, something is happening that you're definitely craving in that space.
But Tracy, now that they said that, I think you were right yesterday when you said, I think what they want is a reaction.
Yes.
Because if you gave a presentation in a classroom or in a room and the lights were all off and you were galvanized, so we need to do this, and you brought the lights up, and they were like scowling and they had their hands up with questions, like they disagreed, that would just be slightly less good than they were all applauding.
Right.
What you don't want is them to be asleep or kind of like, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because it doesn't bother you to have to argue for your position, right?
Mm-mm.
No, you're totally right. It's like a reaction, and ideally a positive reaction, like yes, I'm going to go do it. Yeah, but definitely.
See, I think it sort of depends, because if I love the word reaction, because if somebody says, no, you're crazy, at least I know what I'm working with and be, okay, do we need to go back and rediscern that thing? Or maybe it's not quite right. But if they're nodding their heads, they're, yes, I get it, let's go. The hardest thing is a room of silence.
Yeah. You know, people will say the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. And because if somebody hates you, you feel like, well, they're passionate, I can work with that and probably have a decent opportunity to win them over. But indifference is, there's no inertia or there's no anything. And I think a galvanizer hates lack of reaction.
Yeah. You know, Pat, I think reaction works well for me because as this word about what you crave, because I was just describing this to a colleague of ours, because he was like, we don't have galvanizing. We need to galvanize our son around his grades and a few things. And I said, I think of galvanizing part inspiration. And I always try to like get a reaction out of inspiring. Yeah. And if I don't get that, then it's pushing, you know, that's where it becomes, because all you're wanting is some movement in that direction. So the reaction piece, I think, is resonating a little bit as we talk about this, for sure.
Yeah, the worst thing somebody could probably say to a galvanizer is, I guess, if that's what you want, or whatever. It's like, oh no. So let's have some pumpkin ice cream. Yeah, that sounds great. Or, oh, that sounds disgusting, Dad. But like, whatever, I guess. I would eat it if you wanted me to. Yeah. See, it all comes back to pumpkin ice cream. All right. E, enablement. The genius of enablement. People that have this was one we got right away, but then we said, that's too simple. But we really do think what they need, what they crave is what, Tracy? You have enablement.
Appreciation.
Right. Appreciation. Now, Matt was teasing her going, you mean you want recognition and credit and attention. And frankly, she was like, no, I hate those things. So
no, I do not want that.
People with enablement don't want that. They just want somebody to look at them and go, that made a big difference.
Yes.
You really helped. And that's like, they do crave that. When a person with enablement responds and gives you everything they want, and at the end of the day, you take it for granted and don't acknowledge it.
Ooh, that's rough.
Yeah.
Or if it's ignored, that's rough.
Right. And of course, the sad thing about that is appreciation is free. It costs someone nothing to appreciate somebody. When they don't do it, the cost is huge.
Yeah, Pat, when you said earlier, like the people want to be seen and understood and belong, working with Tracy for all these number of years, I know that she craves like the nuanced appreciation, like the seeing part of, I see how that part of you, that's enablement, that how you came alongside and you helped that. Like enablement is so nuanced too, because it's so relational. And we talk about it as anticipating other people's needs and coming alongside and supporting in all these ways. And so when you're able to really like in a nuanced way, in a very specific way, say, I see how big of a difference you made in, you know, that level of support, like Tracy, what you did for the Working Genius book, and be able to identify, it's not like you didn't write the book, but you have played such a significant role in that, and with your discernment and your enablement. So I love that appreciation. It definitely feels like it hits the nail on the head for
crap.
For
I forgot to thank her for that. I'm just teasing. It's so great.
What would the I like this game we're playing live, the opposite reaction, the opposite word.
You know, we didn't come up with an opposite word. I think it is, there's something about it not being acknowledged.
Ooh, overlooked.
Yes.
Overlooked. That's a good one.
Like, that gets back to that word that you said, wanted. And I think enablement is one that we need to really make sure that we're communicating we want this. What you bring is wanted. It has a seat at the table. It's needed. It's not just a nice to have.
A lot of people aren't proud to admit when they have this. When we do they're like, "Oh, I have enablement," and we're like, "No, you don't understand. You are like the gold in a team." And when people don't have it, but they can get taken advantage of precisely because they actually don't want recognition; they want appreciation.
You know what's also funny, Pat? I've noticed since creation of Working Genius, this might be my favorite one when somebody has it. It's like, because I have so little of it, I almost talk about this one as excitedly as any of the, maybe more so than all the other geniuses. Cause I'm like, boy, do you know how important you are? This is such an amazing gift that you give to your family or your team or the community you serve. So it really is super fun to be able to identify that and then appreciate it.
Well, before we started the podcast, we were talking about this and I was going over some ideas, and the rest of you three, Matthew was on our screen too, gave me no reaction. And Tracy would go smile and nod or shake her head or frown. And you guys, I really appreciate that, because she was responding, like giving me like, okay, I'm going to help you with this. And the rest of you guys have no E, and you're like, yeah, I'll do it. But
and it's funny, and they're G's and they need that from other people, but sometimes they forget to give it.
That's right.
It's because
and I'm one of them too. I'm one of them too.
That's why we're tired of hearing about the pumpkin ice cream. We have our limits.
Well, now that you mentioned it. All right. Finally, we get to tenacity.
And we're out of time. Just kidding.
Yeah. We're not going to be able to finish this. They crave. Now, this was one we struggled with too. They really crave. Well, what is it, Tracy? I'll let you be the deliverer. Clarity. They want to know what do you want, and then they want permission. Like, tell me exactly what you want from me. Don't make it ambiguous, and then tell me, do whatever you need to do to get that done.
Yep.
Right. And ambiguity crushes them. Like, yeah, I don't know if we'll finish this, or we'll probably know when it's good. And they're like, oh no, that's not good enough for me. And I love that. But people with tenacity are like, tell me exactly what completion looks like, and then give me permission to do whatever's necessary.
It's funny.
None of us have tenacity, so we don't know. We don't know who to check this with.
But Julie on our team has tenacity, and I love that word clarity, because it's not just clarity on what do we want. Like, it's down to, she loves going, can you give me a deadline for this? I want to know exactly when you want it completed. And Beau and I never indulge. We're like, Julie, all deadlines are made up, so we can change that. And she's like, no. Even if it's artificial, let's just make one so that we can get the ball moving. And Beau and I were in a conversation with an enablement tenacity genius person yesterday. And he said, hey, I don't need to be the person calling the shots, but I love being the person executing the shots. And so just the knowing, giving the clarity around what is the shot and when do we need it done by, and people with tenacity, given that level of clarity, really, really thrive.
And what's crazy is people like me think I'm doing them a favor by not limiting them, by not giving them clarity.
Yeah.
Like, oh, whenever you get it, whenever you finish, well, what are the standards? Hey, whatever you want to come up with, because I'm saying, well, as an I would like you not to give me any parameters. And they're like, you're crushing me, dude. So that is very interesting. So the worst thing you can say to them is, yeah, well, just make it good. You'll know when you're done. Like, tell them what the standards are, or to tell them, I want you to get this done, but don't do it this way. Don't do it that way. Don't do this. Don't do that. Then it's like, do I get to do this or not? So some permission to execute is good.
I think ambiguity is the word that stood out to me there. When somebody is wishy-washy. Because a lot of people with tenacity can figure out what needs to get done. They can actually see all the tasks that will need to get done, but it's hard if the goal posts are moving.
I think that's the thing. I think that the folks with tenacity really struggle when things change. If just little tweaks along the way really throw them off.
Yeah, especially if the change doesn't really, it's like people are changing, but it's like, I don't know if it's going to make it better. Can you just let me finish?
Yeah, I like that word ambiguity too, for sure.
Yep.
So I just had a thought, you guys, in real time to talk about here. Because I realize when I'm working in my area of competency, I get much more quickly frustrated. And I wonder if it's true in your area of frustration too. Like, so these are in your genius. But when I do have to galvanize, I am allergic to people not moving. And that's how this whole thing came about. I used to galvanize, and if people didn't actually respond, I would get so frustrated because I was already doing something out of my genius. And when I didn't get a response, I would be like, my hair would be on fire.
Yeah.
And I just wonder if as a person who doesn't have ENT, if I did something for someone and they didn't appreciate it, something that I didn't feel like doing, or if I had to tease something, but it wasn't clear what I was supposed to do, I think my ability to tolerate. So I think this is whenever you're working in these areas, it's what you crave. And if you're working in your frustration or your competency and you don't get it, you're probably even less patient than a person in their genius. I just thought of that. Does that make sense?
I 100% agree with that.
Yep.
Tell me what resonates, Beau.
Well, two things. Like, discernment is a competency for me, and I don't like it all when somebody else doesn't trust me. It feels, and it actually can feel sort of belittling.
Right.
But I was thinking about the last month, we've been doing a lot launching this book, Pat, and you've been so affirming of when I've had to use the genius of enablement in this season. And it's meant so much because you've seen it. I have this little baby thimble-sized amount of enablement, and you recognizing it has allowed that thimble to keep getting refreshed. But if it had just been overlooked, it would have been so draining. But if you hadn't been responding to my galvanizing, it probably would have been able to power through a little bit longer.
Right, right. You know something? So Beau and I went on a trip recently, and his job on the trip, in addition to partnering with me on everything, was to kind of to help me with stuff that somebody else usually helps me with who wasn't there. And we went down to the room where I was supposed to do the work, and I'm literally thinking, oh my gosh, it's dry here. I need some. And I look over at the table where I'm sitting, and Beau has put a little chapstick thing there. And I was like, and I know he's not an enabler. And I was like, hey, Beau, when you do stuff like that, I'm just so appreciative. And I know that's not what you do naturally. And you are working your butt off to anticipate my stupid little needs and to provide things for me. And I really notice it and I appreciate it. And I think I kind of knew, like, Beau is working way outside of his comfort zone. And if I don't say something to him, he's going to be like, I hate these trips. So I do think when we do something we're not good at, we want to be appreciated for it.
And I think it kind of makes sense in the way that we've described working genius this whole time, is like, hey, if you're doing the thing that you're genius, it fills you up. It's like recharging your battery. The very act of galvanizing, even when people don't totally respond to me, I'm like, hey, I kind of still enjoy that task. I'd really appreciate it if they would move. But I still like that very act fills me up. When you're working in a competency or frustration, that's what you're saying is like, boy, I have very little tolerance. If I'm kind of pushing outside of my areas of genius and I'm not getting the required response there, it can very easily get frustrating. So I think that's a really great observation.
Yeah. Interesting. So these are real cravings that go along with whatever kind of work we do. And everyone needs what they crave when they're in that space. It doesn't mean everybody needs to be doing their genius in every given task, because sometimes it's not the right time. But whatever they are doing, they need to be fed. It's not needy to want to be fed. So, all right. I love having these conversations. This has been fun because this is like we're inventing and discerning in real time and wondering, and people get to play with us. And that's one of the things I love about Working Genius is we are figuring out further levels of depth as we go. And so many of the users and the readers are helping us with that. And we appreciate that a lot. And we appreciate everyone for listening today. And so we just want to say thank you. And we will see you next time on the Working Genius podcast. God bless.